Do all conversations on abortion have to end badly? They often do, and we'll talk about why and how you can fix that on this episode of The Case for Life. Welcome, it's great to have you. How many times have you been in a conversation with someone on abortion and it heats up almost like a combustible gas fire? Just boom, there's some little spark and the whole thing just blows up in your face. Well, it happens for a number of reasons, one of which is not your fault. The other, though, you might have some ability to control how heated it gets. Let me begin with the part that's not your fault. The reasons why conversations on abortion can heat up in a heartbeat have to do with the big worldview divide that we face in our country today. Our country, in fact, all of the Western world, Europe, Canada, US, all of the Western nations are having huge debates over two key questions. And these questions impact you, they impact your grandchildren, they impact your kids, and they will for the remainder of their lives. Here's the worldview questions we're haggling about right now in the Western world. Number one, we're haggling over the question, is truth true? In other words, is moral truth real and knowable? Can we actually know what's right and wrong? Or are morals just a preference, like choosing chocolate ice cream over vanilla? The second question we're arguing about is what makes humans valuable in the first place. At bottom, the debate over abortion is not about a surgical procedure. It's not about who loves women and who hates women. It's not about who wants to control women's bodies. It's not about religious people forcing their views. None of that is relevant to the actual debate. Here's why abortion debates get heated. Because fundamentally, the arguing question that we're faced with is this: do the unborn count as one of us? And one side says yes, the other says no. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, this strangely sounds very similar to what happened with slavery. And you're right, it was the same exact worldview question. The debate over slavery in the United States and in Great Britain had nothing to do really with property rights, had nothing to do with Northerners wanting to force their narrow religion on Southerners. No, what the debate was about is the slave a man like we are? Because if he's a man, he should not be treated as property like a man owns a hog. In other words, what you've got to do is understand that if the slave has human standing, he should not be subjected to the kind of treatment we were giving him when we forced him to serve us. With abortion, it's the same issue. If the unborn are one of us, the reasons we use for killing them must be as compelling as would be reasons given to justify killing you or me. That's why the debate is so heated. But sometimes it's possible to have a conversation where people actually stick to the issue at hand and actually listen to what's being said. We're going to show you such a conversation in just a moment here. What happened was, a while back, I was on campus at the University of Georgia, and we did some filming of some conversations I had with students on the topic of morals and on the topic of abortion. And we're going to show you a conversation that I think is quite helpful for a number of reasons. First of all, the young lady I was interviewing was very gracious. She was very open to a conversation, and she actually listened. She didn't just, get angry when I would make a point or ask a question. She actually would consider it. And the other thing I admired about her, she would acknowledge when I made a good point. And I know you're probably thinking, that's never happened to me in a conversation on abortion. Well, give a watch to this, and I think you'll notice a couple of things. Number one, I was not working at gotcha questions. This tends to happen in debates over abortion. Each side wants to get the other with a gotcha question that just shuts everything down. You may succeed in shutting your opponent down, but you won't succeed in getting them to rethink their position. So this conversation, I think, actually did some work on her in terms of her rethinking her position. I think you'll see that in the course of our conversation. So let's take a look at this. And when we come back, I will talk about it after you watch this brief interview. I'll talk about it, give you some other pointers and thoughts that I think are relevant to conversations like this. My hope is you'll get some ideas for how you might engage family and friends on the topic of abortion. Let's take a look at this conversation. Here's my first question.
Okay.
Is there a difference between these two statements I'm about to make? Chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla. That's statement one. Statement two, it's wrong to torture toddlers for fun. Notice that right out of the gate, I was determining whether or not she thought abortion was a moral issue or a preference issue, like choosing your favorite flavor of ice cream. That's important because in a relativistic postmodern culture like ours, people think that abortion is a mere preference issue, and we will talk right past each other if we don't establish the ground rules up front. If you heard me say chocolate ice cream is morally superior to vanilla, okay, what would be your response?
Is morally superior? I mean, that's a subjective opinion. I don't think it's, Okay, I guess I would say that saying that chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla is an opinion, whereas I feel like saying it's wrong to torture toddlers for fun, I would say is pretty objective.
Objective. Okay, so there's a difference between objective claims and subjective ones, and morals would fall in the category of objective rather than subjective. Is that?
Because then I don't necessarily agree with that, because I feel like there are a lot of decisions you can make morally that are also subjective depending on the situation. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say morals are objective. You can see here that she has already found that her philosophy is on shaky ground. Look, this young lady is not a fool. She knows that most of her worldview is built on the premise that morals are totally subjective, and she doesn't want to give that ground up. The problem is, she already did. Is there any place ever you could imagine it would be okay to torture toddlers for fun? No.
So that'd be one objective moral truth we could agree on.
Yes.
Okay. Remember, one of the points we established in this session was that we've got to be clear on what words mean, especially words in our formal pro-life argument. And one of the words we need to define is the word wrong. So notice in the conversation right now with this young woman, I'm establishing what the word wrong means, that it's an objective term, not a subjective one. And you can see she's intellectually honest enough to concede that she does accept that there might be some objective morals out there, at least in some situations. Is it possible to like something and still say it's wrong?
Yes.
For example, my father-in-law drives Corvettes. I'd love to steal one and drive it, but I don't do it because it would
because it's wrong.
It would be wrong. But would it be subjectively wrong or objectively wrong?
I think we say it's objectively wrong to steal because that's the law and that's what we're taught. But I suppose if you were to feel like stealing a car is morally okay, then that's your, I guess. So I guess I would say that morals really are subjective, because even though I might feel like torturing toddlers for fun is wrong, somebody else could feel a different way. So I guess I can't really make the claim that morals are objective because they're not.
She sees the box that she's put herself in, and she's trying to switch her position to hedge it a bit. But I'm not going to let her do it. I'm going to graciously but firmly press the point that her worldview at this point isn't going to hold water. If someone felt it was okay to torture toddlers for fun, would that make it okay?
No.
So it would still be objectively wrong even though they felt it was okay?
Okay, I see. Okay.
This is not a got you.
No,
I'm just
I know.
asking for
I know.
clarity.
It's hard because I feel like it's kind of situational.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
could there be some things that aren't situational?
Like in terms of defining what is objective and subjective. Like, for example, like is it okay to kill 2 people in order to save 10 others? That's kind of a subjective moral situation. Is that like, so that's
Well,
kind of what
let
I'm
me
thinking
ask one
of.
that I think might
Yeah.
help. Is there any possible world we could conceive of where racism and rape are okay?
No.
So if there's no possible world where they could be okay, those would be objective moral truths.
Right.
So you're not saying there are no objective moral truths. You're saying that not everything is an objective moral truth.
Right.
Would that be a fair? I don't want to put
Yes.
words in your mouth.
No, I would say that some things I feel like are objective.
Okay.
You have to evaluate like harm to others or, kind of stuff like that. But I feel like there are some things that can be subjective. I don't think it's fair to say all morals
Right.
are objective or subjective.
Notice that she now softens her position enough to say that some morals are subjective and some are objective, which gives me some room to work. We go on to talk a bit about things like what happened in Nazi Germany, but let's go ahead and skip ahead to the subject at hand, abortion.
In January, the state of New York liberalized its abortion laws to basically codify abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy.
Okay.
And it also stripped protection from any fetus that survives an abortion procedure. It stripped the legal requirement that that fetus be treated as a patient.
Okay.
Your thoughts on that?
On abortion. So I'm generally pro-choice. However, I will say, for me, there's even limits to that. Life is about compromises, and I feel like once you hit the 3rd trimester, you've had, about 6 months to make the decision to understand, okay, am I, financially able to care for a child? Am I able to emotionally do that? Blah, blah, yeah, this whole thing. So I feel like doing it up all the way until birth would kind of then be unfair to the child at that point. So I would say kind of, it's not even really meeting in the middle. It's actually kind of meeting 2/3 of the way there.
Tell me why you picked that spot as being the decisive point.
So I know the fetus is like pretty well developed. You can feel the fetus can move, around or have a heartbeat around the 8-week mark, I believe. So it honestly develops a lot faster than people might think it does.
You can see that this knowledge is already bothering her. She started out by saying she was compromising by admitting that abortion is immoral after the 2nd trimester, but she ends up by admitting that most people don't realize how quickly a child develops.
So
Yeah.
it's the development of the fetus that
Yeah.
once it reaches a certain stage of development, it has more rights than it did before that point. Would that be a fair way to...
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I just, I don't know. I'm not really about telling people like what to do with their bodies and their choices.
Don't miss the deflection here. Remember, we made the point that the abortion debate is not about telling people what to do with their bodies. I don't think she's making a conscious effort to dodge here, as much as she is simply parroting something she's heard in the culture around her. But we're not going to get sidetracked either way. We're going to stay on message.
But I do feel like once a fetus gets to a certain development point, it is like, in a sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So last question. If development gives us our right to life or our value, do you believe then those with more development should have greater rights than those with less?
You're talking about like abilities versus disabilities?
Well, just development in general. The fetus, as you said, up until about 2/3 of the way through, where you would draw the line, is not as developed as it will be when it's born, or when it's a teenager, or when it's an adult.
Right.
My question is, if development is what our right to life hangs on, does it follow that those with more physical development have a greater right to life than those with less, in or out of the womb? Just as
Okay.
a principle. the way I'm approaching this is, if development determines the value of the fetus, doesn't it follow that those with more development have greater rights than those with less?
Yeah.
Is that a problem for human equality?
Yes.
Again, I appreciate her thoughtful honesty here. This young woman is truly engaging. My hat's off to her.
It's just a fine line, and I'm not going to say that it makes sense, or that,
Yeah.
that following that would, be equal. But I think the reason that we, people that identify with my group or opinion, draw the line is because a fetus is, it's within your, it's hard because it's like your choice whether to have a child or not, right? Like whether to conceive or do that, and say it happens by accident, or you were irresponsible, or like some other extreme circumstances, whatever. I guess just the fact that we draw the line because this is another person inside another person. So therefore, say if I'm pregnant, right, I have the control. This is my body. This is my choice what to do. So I feel like that's why I kind of draw the line between inside the womb versus outside. Mm-hmm. Whether or not that makes sense or is justified, I don't really know, but...
Here she makes the claim that as long as the baby is inside her body, it's her choice. She's reverting back to more of a pro-choice position. So I follow up with an example from embryology and fetal surgery that's designed to create cognitive dissonance.
There are doctors at the University of San Francisco Medical Center, mm-hmm. and they're doing surgery on fetuses in utero. And what they're doing is they're repairing herniated diaphragms. So what they do is they remove the fetus, repair the diaphragm, put him back in, he's born 40 weeks.
Okay.
If location matters, whether it's in the womb or out, does that particular fetus go from having no rights just prior to the surgery to having rights while outside during the surgery, but back to having no rights again when placed back in?
This is like blowing my little liberal moderate mind. I think if it's inside the mother, it's the parent's choice. I don't really know how else to put that.
Fair enough. You have been fantastic. Thank you for letting us take some time with you and for mm-hmm. talking to us, and really appreciate you doing that. I know you got a lot on your agenda, but thank you.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Of course.
All right. You've had a chance to look at that conversation I had with the student. I want to point out a couple of things. Number one, notice how worldviews matter. Over and over again on this show, we have stressed that people bring their worldviews to topics on abortion. And often pro-lifers fail to account for that. For example, if someone's worldview of the human person is body-self dualism, in other words, they believe that the real you has nothing to do with your body, the real you is simply your thoughts, your desires, your cognitive processes. If you think that's what makes you human and valuable, then talking to somebody about fetal development isn't going to mean straw to you. If you hear somebody give you a demonstration, look how this fetus develops. Why, by week 6, it looks like this. By week 12, it can already dream. By week 16, it can feel pain. Whatever it is you pick out doesn't mean squat to you if you've bought the notion that what makes your identity has nothing to do with your body and everything to do with your mental processing. So if someone brings that worldview to the table and you don't engage that foundational worldview, you're going to talk right past them. There's all kinds of other worldviews. You may have noticed in this particular conversation, I started immediately with the ground rules. In other words, is the person I'm talking to one who actually believes that right and wrong are real? Or do they think that it's just a mere preference? You choose your morality, I choose mine. And just like we have different tastes when it comes to ice cream, So we have different tastes in morality. We would never judge you based on liking chocolate over vanilla. So in the same way, we don't make moral judgments about what one culture might do over another or what one person might do over another. And I think you saw in this conversation that I chose to engage her underlying worldview before I even went to a conversation about abortion. And I think this is helpful because I've had a lot of people say to me, how do I talk about abortion to people who, don't want to talk about it, maybe to family members around the Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner table? How can I talk about abortion without looking like I'm just wanting to bring up an awful subject while people are finishing their turkey and stuffing? Well, one way to get started is to go after their underlying worldview. What is it they believe about human beings in the first place? Do they believe humans are valuable for what they do? Or are they of the persuasion that humans have intrinsic value, that they're valuable in and of themselves? What do they think about right and wrong? In their minds, are right and wrong real and something we can know? Or is it somehow beyond our ability to know right from wrong? You want to get answers to those questions before you engage on a specific topic like abortion or gay marriage, for example, or transgenderism. It's helpful to know what worldview are they bringing to the table. Now, you notice the student was wearing a shirt that said equality. So in the course of my conversation, rather than challenge her on what she meant by that, I chose to engage her on the worldview she was bringing to the table. You know, it was kind of interesting. On one hand, she was arguing that a fetus develops and gains value as it develops. But on the other hand, she's wearing a t-shirt that says all humans should be treated equally and fairly, a premise I can agree with. Well, if she comes to the conclusion that the unborn are indeed human beings, then shouldn't they also be treated equally? Now, I did not call out her shirt and say, look at your shirt, you should believe what it says. I didn't do that. I didn't try to make her uncomfortable. Instead, what I wanted to do was give her something to think about by talking about what is it that makes us equal and valuable in the first place? And why do fetuses fail the test? And pointing out to her that if she picks out properties that make us valuable, then it follows those who have more of those properties or characteristics have a greater right to life than those who have less, and her case for equality then would fall apart. So giving her something to think about is the way to avoid an inflammatory conversation. It's also a way to avoid having the person just shut you down and decide they don't want to hear anything more about what you're saying. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to close out the show by giving you a couple of tactical points that will help you in these types of conversations. And I'll also mention a few resources that can help you engage others better on one-on-one personal conversations. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hello, friends. You may not have time to read a full-length treatment of abortion like I've done in this book, The Case for Life, the second edition, but you may have time to take what amounts to 7 sessions, a week's worth of study if you want to do it day by day, to learn how to defend your pro-life views persuasively. We have a basic course that will help you do just that. You will learn how to make a formal case for the pro-life position. You will learn how to defend it with science and philosophy. Even with non-Christians, you can make a case for the pro-life view. Then we'll teach you how to handle objections, how to recognize the 5 bad ways people argue about abortion, and how they often bring up things that are beside the point. You'll learn to keep the main thing, so that you're in charge instead of feeling like you're in the hot seat whenever the issue of abortion comes up. Visit the website for details. Welcome back, friends. Good to have you with us today. Before I go any further, I want to remind you one more time that we have a Case for Life course up, although we call it something a little more pedestrian. We call it Pro-Life 101, and here's why we call it that. You'll learn to make a case for life in less than a week. In fact, in just 7 sessions, you will learn to master the moral logic of the pro-life view, and you will learn how to state your case persuasively and graciously. All right, before the break, we were talking about conversations and getting at underlying worldviews. Let me give you a couple of sources that may help you do that. First, you can always take a look at this book, The Case for Life, the second edition. In there, I've got a chapter on engaging with good questions. If you want to go to the person who trained me to do that well, I suggest Gregory Kokel's book, Tactics. It's an excellent book on learning to engage people with thoughtful questions, aimed not at gotcha moments, but aimed at furthering the conversation. And then one more on the case of relativism, people who think right and wrong are merely up to us, that there's no objective rules. This book by Francis J. Beckwith and Greg Kokel, Relativism, Feet Firmly Planted in Midair, is the place you want to go to read up on that. Okay, now a couple of points in closing here. First of all, get past this idea that you need to just make statements in order to persuade people. My colleague and mentor, Greg Cunningham, puts it real well. He says, for too long, the pro-life movement has been shouting conclusions rather than establishing arguments. That is spot on. In other words, when we hold signs saying abortion kills children, people driving by on the road go, nice, that's your opinion. I have a different one. So what? That doesn't help us. But if we say something more thoughtful like, don't you think all humans have an equal right to life? Well, who wants to, disparage that one? Nobody. So I think it's important to ask thoughtful questions and not just make statements. Secondly, watch your tone. It's very important you not come off as, I'm just going to get you, I'm here to corner you and make you feel stupid. If you get to the point where people are being made to feel dumb, they're not going to listen to you anymore. I think you noticed in this conversation with a young woman, we parted as friends. And I mean that. We generally liked talking to each other. That was a genuine thing. It was not oh man, you really embarrassed me for 10 minutes of conversation here. No, she was appreciative of the fact that I engaged her, got to know her thoughts. I thanked her afterward for sharing what she believed. And I wasn't looking for a place to jump on her and make her look silly. No, I just wanted to give her something to think about. It's what Greg Kokel talks about in his book, Tactics, where he says here that the real goal of a conversation is not to win the argument, not to close the deal, but to put a pebble in someone's shoe. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a pebble in your shoe when you're out hiking, but what happens is that pebble's going to wear on you and wear on you until you stop to deal with it. And this is what our goal should be as we're engaging as Christians. Give people something to think about. Don't worry about winning the argument on the spot. To use a baseball analogy, if you'll allow me to, add another metaphor here, think about getting a single rather than swinging for the fences. Just get on base. And from there, you can advance further. And oftentimes, when you give people something to think about, you're in a key position to engage them later with more thoughtful conversation in helping them change their mind. Remember, we are Christian ambassadors. We are not bulls in china shops. Thanks for joining us today. It's great to have you with us. I look forward to seeing you on our next episode.